All right, and I'm sure you can indeed get to follow our live coverage of the Anambra governorship elections right here on Channels TV. We have updates for you, we have commentaries, we have analysis for you tomorrow. All eyes are in Anambra. But from this, we move on to something else as we get to celebrate the 65th anniversary of Ford Foundation. Bukola, you have this one.
Yes, indeed. And we have joining us to discuss this, Dr. Chichi Aniagolu, representative of the Ford Foundation. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program, madam. Dr. Chichi Aniagolu, Regional Director, Ford Foundation.
West Africa.
West Africa. Can you hear me?
Thank you for having me.
Indeed. It's been 65 years of the exploits of the Ford Foundation in West Africa. That's as old as Nigeria is. Congratulations on the anniversary.
I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, indeed. Beautiful. So let's start this way. The Ford Foundation, of course, we know characteristically is in the work of inclusion, gender advocacy, justice, and it's been 65 years. And, you know, it has worked with organizations through grants. How has this investment shaped the region's social justice and development landscape?
Thank you. 65 years is a long time, and it is actually 65 years of unbroken support to West Africa. So the Ford Foundation never left West Africa. And in that period, we have done quite a lot to support the country, making sure that we are supporting initiatives that mirror the history of the country at the time. So, for instance, at the start of our work here at independence, the challenge was how to have a workforce that will help power the new emerging country. And so the support was to training civil servants, lecturers, scholars, academics, everybody who we felt was going to be instrumental to helping the development of the country. Then the country went to war. And at the end of the war, the challenge was rebuilding the country and also, you know, feeding the country, because a lot of the food supply and chain had been broken. And so the Ford Foundation supported the construction and the building of the IITA, the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture, supported a lot of initiatives around Green Revolution, and made sure that the country was able to get back on its feet. Then in the 80s, when the challenges of HIV came in, Ford was one of the first organizations to support awareness creation, to support the fight against stigmatization, and also making sure that, you know, people who were HIV positive got drugs. And then the return to democracy was another issue. Anybody who's a human rights activist in Nigeria would have in one way or another been supported by the Ford Foundation. We were in the trenches, we supported the organizations until we were able to get the country back to democracy. And after that, you know, now after the return to democracy, the issue was then, you know, how do you make sure that, like we say in Nigeria, the dividends of democracy reach the people? And so the focus was on trying to make sure that the rights of people are respected, that we do not have, you know, that inequality is reduced, and that the people are able to enjoy what anybody who is living in a democratic country supports. So the foundation has really been instrumental to the country. A lot of the policies that we have in this country that are have also done a lot of training of journalists. I'm sure that people from channels have benefited from our capacity building. Even for some we have provided equipment and the rest of it. So it's been a very holistic support to the country. But the overarching reason for it is to create a country where social justice is respected.
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to capture that in my next question, but incredible work you and your team are doing right there at Ford Foundation. Your investment, I mean, we hear it totals over $500 million since 1960. But that leads me to my next question, because many argue that perhaps what the continent needs, or what Africa needs, is economic empowerment. So the big question is, why is your focus social justice?
So indeed, there's no question that Africa is struggling with economic challenges. But what we have come to learn along the way is that without social justice, economic empowerment will not work. We have had a lot of multinationals leave this country, not because they didn't have the wherewithal to run their factories or to provide the services that they were providing. But the challenge was that the enabling environment just wasn't there. So we have international companies leaving, we have local companies shutting down. And the reason behind that is because, we don't have an enabling environment. And that's what social justice does. The social justice ensures that the rule of law is obeyed, that discrimination is reduced, that inequality is reduced, because if a country has 1% billionaire and everybody else is poor, nobody's going to come and set up a factory in which they are focusing on 1%, because they need the critical mass of people to buy from them. And so if you have a country in which so many people are poor, you are not going to be able to create an environment, that will enable business. And so what social justice does is that it creates that environment. It creates an enabling environment. It ensures that people's rights are respected. It ensures that when a company comes to your country, that they know that if they have a conflict, that they can go to court and that the courts will respect their rights in a speedy manner. So without social justice, you cannot have economic empowerment. And that's why we focus on social justice. We support the government, we support civil society organizations to provide an enabling environment for Nigeria's policies, to thrive.
Yeah, that's a very, valid point there. And that leads me to the next, concern, particularly that has come through over the last 2 years. International development assistance has really reduced, particularly under the Trump administration. How has that impacted on the work of the Ford Foundation? Has it put a strain on the Ford Foundation to do more in terms of funding and support for, your different areas of intervention?
Well, to start with, the Ford Foundation is an independent foundation, so we don't rely on the American government or any government to provide resources for us. We have an endowment, and that's where the money we use for the work we do around the world comes from. So directly, it does not affect our own resources. But indirectly, of course, it does, because, we're here to try and solve social problems. And philanthropy does not have enough money to do that. So the support from governments around the world, bilateral and multilateral aid, was something that we also worked with and partnered with to ensure that civil society organizations and governments around the world are able to get the resources to address the most critical challenges in the world. With the dwindling resources, a lot more people are coming to us for help. And we just don't have the resources to address every single challenge that we need. So it has created more challenges for the sector. It has created the need for more resources to be mobilized, and we don't have it. So for me, one of the things that we have been doing in at the West Africa office is trying to enable and encourage African philanthropy, local philanthropy. There's a lot of giving that's going on the continent, and in Nigeria as well. Nigerians are very generous people. They are givers. But the challenge is that the giving is not done in a systematic and in an organized and coordinated way. So there's a lot of individual giving, but it's not really changing things because it is not done in a way that addresses systemic problems. So we're hoping that the Nigerian and African billionaires can step in and also support education, health, human rights, those issues that they themselves see are challenges to their business, and that they can start doing what a Ford Foundation does. The Ford Foundation, was started by Henry and Edsel Ford. These were two private individuals in America. And today we are in almost every region in the world providing support. There's absolutely no reason why an African philanthropist and high net worth individuals cannot do the same thing, if not for the world, at least for Nigeria and the African continent.
Well, Dr. Anyagulu, I mean, it's been a journey of 65 years. So I'm just wondering, perhaps, if you can paint a picture for our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world, what lessons you have learned in this journey of 65 years.
So one of the beauty of the way the Ford Foundation works is that we work with local with local actors. We prioritize local actors. We hardly give money to, I mean, we do, but the bulk of our funds goes to local organizations and local governments and local private sector people. And what we have learned is that they are the ones who have the answer, that this continent can really advance and change its circumstances if it believes in the power and in the capacity of its own people to understand, to analyze, and to address the challenges of the continent. The solutions are here. Africans have the solution. But if we don't, but you need a deliberate effort to really address that. And it is one that has to be open-minded. And because we don't have solutions only in one ethnic group or in one religious group, we have to be open to say we're looking for solutions to our problem, and Africans can find it. So nothing stops us from going to Uganda to get a Ugandan to support, or to go, to Zambia, or for a Zambian to get a Nigerian. Africans need to start looking in, and because we do that, we see how powerful people on the continent and how much they're able to address the challenge. That's number one. Number two, like I said already, we see that focusing on social justice is extremely important. You cannot build a nation without social justice. A country that is that has a lot of discrimination, whether it is religious, whether it is gender, whether it is with people with disability, just cannot develop. And so we have learned that you have to end discrimination. You have to end polarization. You have to end inequality if you want to develop as a nation. So that's another lesson that we have learned. On the flip side, we have learned that young people are becoming quite exasperated with democracy. A lot of young people are not seeing what we call in Nigeria the dividends of democracy. And so for many of them, they don't see what we see when we say that democracy is the best form of government. And yet we know that it is. And so the continent, the country, really needs to prioritize that hope. It's good that the government's mantra is renewed hope. We need to renew hope in democracy. We need to renew hope in our young people. They make up more than 60% of the population. And for having those kinds, if young people remain despaired, that could have grave consequences for Nigeria and for the continent. So we have to renew the hope of young people in democracy. We need to renew their hope that their countries can cater for them, that their countries, care about them and will prioritize them in policy and in practice.
And, you mentioned some critical areas, at the start of this particular response to the last question when you talked about discrimination, lack of inclusion and gender challenges. Speaking of which areas will the Ford Foundation be prioritizing for development in the social justice space, not just in Nigeria now, but in West Africa, when you consider some of the challenges fueling this problem? Security, for instance, which we've been talking about for pretty much the rest of the week.
So we really try to go to the core of what the challenge is, and that's what we support. In West Africa, we have three main areas that we are putting in a lot of resources. One is in democracy. We launched a $21 million fund in partnership with other philanthropic organizations like the MacArthur Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation, Open Society, and Luminate. And these organizations came together with the Ford Foundation to create what we call the West Africa Development Democracy Fund. And the idea is to reimagine democracy in the sub-region in West Africa, and to try and halt the backsliding of democracy. We're also looking, our two main areas of support are gender, racial and ethnic justice, where we are making sure that women are prioritized, and gender issues, especially gender-based violence, which is one of the critical reasons that affects women and stops women from effectively participating in political and social life. So we're addressing gender-based violence, we're especially the prevention of gender-based violence. We're also working on the natural resource and climate justice space, because we recognize that most West African countries are natural resource dependent, but it has not been serving the purpose for the people. So we're trying to ensure that communities where extraction happens benefit from those extractions. And we're also ensuring that the energy transition benefits Africa. It's not a one track for Africa. Africa is actually the least contributor to carbon emission. But of course, we know that we are victims of climate change, probably one of the worst, because we don't have the resources to address those. But more importantly, we are not looking at the justice question. The fact that extraction, whether it is fossil fuel extraction or natural or solid minerals, or what we now call the green minerals, all of it is happening in Africa. And it is devastating communities. So in a way, we're actually not transitioning, because we are going from fossil fuel extraction to green minerals extraction. And so communities are not benefiting. So what we're trying to do is, how can we make sure that extraction that happens in communities benefit the people? And how do we ensure that this energy transition recognizes that Africa, and West Africa particularly, are natural resource dependent countries? So you can't just stop fossil fuel without taking into consideration what the implications will be. The justice questions are extremely important, and that's what it is that we are focusing on, and hoping, of course, that we can bring West African governments also to begin to prioritize the justice question in the energy transition.
And Dr. Aniagolu, non-governmental organizations that are smart will be watching you now and doing their research and dusting up their proposals in preparation for the direction that you have laid out for the organization in the next, phase. We must anchor at this point, and thank you very much for coming on the program. And congratulations on your 65th anniversary. Dr. Chichi Aniagolu is the Regional Director, West Africa, for the Ford Foundation. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you.